Welcome to the 29th Annual Exhibit of Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies here at the Hanover Fair 2023. We started in the 1990s, so we've been here for quite some time talking about the challenges. Challenges are the topic of our next discussion here, the challenges of large-scale hydrogen products, and there are examples with curious abbreviations, the IPCEI and the CEEAG. They're very important, these abbreviations. We need more detail, and to give us this detail, I'll be talking to Sven-Erik Kratz, who is CEO of SEK Consulting. Please welcome with me Sven-Erik.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sven-Erik. So, first things first, of course, you have to tell us who you are. What is SEK and what do they do?
Yeah, SEK is a strategy consulting company founded in 2009 in the hydrogen sector, specifically since 2012. We're supporting clients from energy and utilities to industries to the mobility sector when it comes to the planning and development of strategies and concrete projects on hydrogen generation. So we are currently involved in projects for refineries, for hydrogen hubs, for steel company that want to decarbonize their processes by the introduction of green hydrogen.
Can you give us examples of the projects? You're not a manufacturer, so it's a consulting service, but what projects specifically are you involved in?
Yeah. Well, that's a diversity actually of clients. So ones which have renewable assets in their portfolio, so classical energy companies, renewable companies that want to de-risk their renewable assets by connecting electrolyzers, green hydrogen production to their assets. We help them in order to identify off-takers. We help them from the very beginning to develop a project. We create the base of design. We calculate the cost of hydrogen produced by building up a high-level facility design that already incorporates data of the main components, electrolyzers, compressors, storage, and interfaces or HRSs, depending on the application. And from that onward, we support the clients with support in the supplier selection process, so we help them to write specific tenders. And, well, as discussed earlier or introduced, there are a lot of curious abbreviations like IPCEI or CEAG. These are, well, necessary funding programs or state aid programs for the erection of electrolyzers. As we are all aware, for the time being, hydrogen generation, especially large scale, still lacks profitability in several aspects, and we still need to close the funding gap by public grants. In that specific cases I'll mention later, that is a tremendous amount, and these programs I will talk about a bit more. But let me first enhance a bit on what we are serving the client with. We want to make projects for the client, but in order to do so, because of this funding gap, we as well provide funding expertise, so we help the clients to identify suitable funding programs and support them in writing the applications. And that already needs to incorporate a lot of pre-planning, pre-engineering stuff, so it already incorporates the necessity to identify the right plot, to take care of the permittability of the project in a very, very early stage. Second aspect is you need to be very specific in the application for this funding projects in the cost estimations. So we, since 2014, conduct a regular market dialogue with the main component manufacturers, from electrolyzer to compressors to storage, in order to have this data available in a very early stage. And the suppliers would be overwhelmed if for each and every project we would approach them. So we do it on a regular basis each year. We have a very strict process of confidentiality. So suppliers are always aware how we use this data and in which project applications this data is being used. So that helps both sides. It helps the suppliers. They get a sense of what is in the pipeline of projects, and it reduces their effort to bid concretely in a very early stage on these projects, as well as it helps us and the clients to have concrete data and numbers to calculate. Yeah. All in all, it forces us to become funding experts as well. So that is another aspect of our service to the client. And as we heard already a lot in the course of the last days, regulatory framework conditions are a major stepping stone for large-scale projects. So just to name the one and most important thing, the Renewable Energy Directive 2 was a delegated act. We're still waiting on getting it really penned in paper, hopefully now as we learned on the 10th of June. Looking forward, because no client will take a financial investment decision before that transparency on the regulatory framework conditions is there. That brings me to the second part of it.
Okay, we can enter into that right away, but I just wanted to interject. Okay, so the one thing that is interesting is consulting services help you to not have to reinvent the wheel. Exactly. Once you have a project launching, you have a model for continuing project models, project-based initiatives. If I could expand this, and I hope I'm not breaking from your original narrative here, but let's talk generally about the challenges facing large-scale hydrogen projects in general. Can you give us some examples where your consulting services play a role?
And what we actually do is we have developed over the years a tool set that is actually being applied and applicable to most of the projects. So we have a highly detailed and standardized business case calculation tool, which allows us to adapt easily to different typical use cases. So production in a refinery, production for mobility, long-haul trucks or public transport. We were, by the way, the accompanying research company in a consortium with Fraunhofer and Sphera for the German Ministry for Transportation when it comes to buses. These kind of standardized tools, another one is the hydrogen capacity configurator that allows us to optimize the renewable energy feed-in. So we analyze the profile of a wind farm, of a PV farm, and we have the demand profile of the offtake, and then it is the riddle to optimize the capacity of the electrolyzer to the offtake demand, because as you all know, the renewables are volatile by nature. In order to balance the volatility and the offtake demand, you need to introduce flexibility by storage. That is done by this tool, and that helps in all of our projects. We have defined for companies who are very early in the process of becoming a player in the hydrogen economy, a so-called phase 1 program, where we evaluate projects in a time span of 1 to 2 months, analyze the demand side, analyze the energy supply side, to helping the companies to evaluate very quickly, is it the time, is it the right application to enter the market, and that gives orientation in the very beginning. So these are 3 examples of tools we are providing that are highly standardized and I think easy to grasp from the value for the customer we create. But then with large-scale projects, of course, the complexity increases beyond the level where you can work with standardized projects, and the challenges there are quite different. Now I come to these abbreviations to give you just 2 examples with 2 projects we are supporting. The one project is a refinery project where gray hydrogen used so far for the cracking process, for example, is replaced by green hydrogen, or is going to be replaced by green hydrogen. We have the legislation with the RED II, and hopefully in near future the delegated act that gives them the positive business case for these kind of applications. And in order to build this large-scale appliance, we are talking about 120 megawatt. It is important to get funding in this early phase. So the German ministry has reacted on the definition of the so-called important projects of common European interest, hard to spell, by the European Commission. That allows the member states to increase or to go beyond the normal state aid guideline that is limited by 70% funding up to 100% funding. The problem there is the process is unbelievably complex. So we are celebrating in these, I think it was 2 months ago, we celebrated the 2nd anniversary of the grant application, or the application of interest for these projects. And then you can imagine, you plan a project 2 years ago. When is the FID? You are talking to suppliers about capacities, electrolyzer capacities. You're talking to grid operators about the availability of grid connection extensions. And the process was initially announced to be ready in the course of a year. We are now above 1 year, and that actually creates tremendous problems, since the whole planning is becoming a mess, not because of the client, but because of the circumstances of the delays of this bureaucratic process. So that, of course, yield to a situation where, for example, with a grid operator, they plan the grid capacities with the German grid development plan. When you exceed the point where your capacity is reserved, then another project can come, be it an electrolyzer project or any other electricity consuming project, and can take away the capacity. So then you have a delay that is much more than just a few months. We are talking years. So we need to have more simple, easy and quick processes to bridge the funding gap that we still have when it comes to large-scale electrolyzer. Another project example is a hydrogen hub producing green hydrogen for steel, for chemicals, industries and mobility. Same procedures. This sized project were asked to become an IPCEI project. Same problem there. You get 70 questions, one case back from the European Commission. After 2 years, the world has changed in a lot of aspects, so you have to rewrite stuff. And again, we don't want to be funding experts. We want to make projects, but we are forced to do funding support for our clients. And what we wish for is a much more handy and pragmatic approach here by the government. I'm talking about this because I want to create understanding, and understanding on the supplier side as well.
I mean, they need to be able to plan.
Exactly.
It already is a capital and intellectual investment if you start to plan a project, and these costs are substantial. I always think of the examples where the government decides, for instance, to finance families who need extra support for education for their children. And you look at the programs and you discover that most of the people eligible for this support are unaware or don't know how to apply, or the application process is just too demanding on the individuals who should be accessing these services. That's a bad correlation to what we're talking about here, but the simple question is, how do we reduce bureaucracy? How do we streamline this process? There has to be, maybe this is part of your job now, not only to talk to the clients, but to, tweet to the government, please, this is what needs to change.
We actually do. I'm for another project, to give a third example, not in your list. One of our clients is a steel company, a second-road steel company, so they have an electric arc furnace. So in the melting process, they are already decarbonized when they use green electricity for their process. But to decarbonize the process completely, you need to decarbonize the rotating mill oven, which uses high-temperature heat to reheat the steel beams to a level of temperature that you can't do by an electric oven. But for the time being, policy is strictly reluctant on introducing hydrogen when it comes to temperature heating applications. And we talk to state secretaries, to the respective ministries, in order to create understanding. If you want to decarbonize, if we want to reach our climate greenhouse gas reduction targets, we need to quickly adapt the regulatories and make it easier for these companies. The climate, the CCFDs introduced as a concept now by the German government, is a good approach in principle, because at the end of the day it's a question of making green products competitive on the market. But again, the process is so tremendous complex that the companies need assistance to even understand the request by the ministries. And that doesn't help us when there's a new German word, Deutschlandgeschwindigkeit. It means that we are good in speeding up the decarbonization process in Germany. Well, the reality is we're doing pretty much the opposite of it at the moment, and there are some concrete statements here addressed, for example, by the German Hydrogen Association in their recent strategy paper. The first thing what we need in order to push the market is we need to have a market design that has concrete sector-specific obligations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If we have this kind of obligation that triggers a market, and the question of competitiveness will vanish, because everybody needs to invent products that are decarbonized in that way.
We know that decarbonizing the industry, everyone thinks of the electrical grid, which is only 15% of the energy consumed in Germany. Decarbonizing the industry is a massive task. And we really need to speed up, don't we? What is the outlook for the future? This sounds slightly pessimistic, but these are solvable problems because it's simply
Exactly.
a communication and policy initiative. The big decisions have been made. The government knows we have to decarbonize. Can you give us a brief synopsis of how this is going to happen quickly?
Yeah, so the synopsis is in principle introduce this kind of market triggers in order to speed up the process, because then we don't need this vast bureaucracy in grant applications. And the good thing, and I would like to end with a positive outlook, is we have now already a lot of projects that are addressing tremendous amounts of greenhouse gas emission reductions, bring them quickly on the road, and multiplying these blueprints in the industry. That, I think, is the most valuable way we can take towards our 2030 goals. And yeah, there comes another reminder to it, but please, to the industry, that is something that we all should take in our hearts. Let's get rid of all the marketing fuss. You hear tremendous numbers at the moment, how much megawatts, gigawatts are going to be planned and built in the next years. Please start to talk about your project when they are becoming specific, and we support you as a company to make your project to become real.
Okay, there's so much more details to talk about. Obviously, people should join Sven-Erik at the booth, which is G30.
G30.
Yeah, over there. I've been talking with Sven-Erik Kratz, who's CEO of SEK Consulting. Thank you for your presentation here with me, and please come back next year to join us.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
Thank you, Sven-Erik.
Thank you.